Hello everybody. So today I want to talk about KULR Stock. KULR, it's a company that I consider to be in the sweet spot, kind of an optimal spot where you have both Bitcoin and you also have a very forward-looking business, a complicated business, a space business, aerospace, military, batteries, lots of things at the edge of tech. And you get Bitcoin on top of that. And it's why I like KULR quite a bit. But KULR, seems like a strange pick. It is strange because the market, I think, wrongly identified it as a Bitcoin Treasury company at some point at the beginning of the year, while they are not that. They are a Bitcoin Plus company. They said they would stack 90% of their cash reserves into Bitcoin, 90%. So their goal is to stack Bitcoin. Their goal is to put their profits into Bitcoin, their fundraise into Bitcoin. But their goal is not to use Bitcoin to generate more Bitcoin, if that makes any sense. Their activities have nothing to do with Bitcoin. Their activities are unrelated to Bitcoin. So you have other Bitcoin Plus companies out there like Coinbase, for example, Square, Overstock, Mercado Libre a little bit. They have a little bit of Bitcoin. But all of these bigger companies that also have Bitcoin, their bag tends to be very, very small relative to their market cap. This is not the case of KULR. I consider KULR's bag to be an enormous margin of safety for an otherwise risky business. Their market cap is 214 million. Their Bitcoin is 124 million Bitcoin, and they have 20 million in cash, and they have no debt. That's the state of KULR. So if you look at their MNAV enterprise value, it's actually a 1.5. It's one of the few companies where EV MNAV is actually lower than market cap MNAV. This is a company, to me, that has a tremendous margin of safety because really only about 30 to 40% on the business, depending on the season, is due to the KULR space activities, the KULR space batteries. The rest of the market cap can be explained by the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And even though KULR is not a business that I would buy if they didn't have Bitcoin, the fact that they have Bitcoin leads me to be interested in this company, which is more at the edge of innovation. They're higher on the risk curve. I would argue KULR is perhaps the type of company that ARK Invest could be interested in, not for the Bitcoin, but for their battery technology, for their autonomous tech ETF. CAFI would likely, in my view, like KULR quite a bit, actually, if they looked at it. Anyways, this company is growing fast. They are projecting to double their revenue in 2025. There's very sparse data, very little data on this company. But if I input the trailing 12-month revenue of 13 million and I put 100% in there and I use their gross margin now, their EBITDA margin is unreadable right now. So they lose money. Just know that. They lose money. But, they have so much Bitcoin and cash on the balance sheet, they can lose money for a long while. Anyways, the point is you get to an enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth of a 0.13 for a high growth, money-losing company, but with an extensive cash runway and with a fundraise capability, right? And that can potentially borrow against its Bitcoin if it needed to. There's a lot of things going on with this company. So now that I've talked about the Bitcoin and why I like the margin of safety that is given by the Bitcoin, and imagine if Bitcoin doubles. If Bitcoin doubles, then the whole company's market cap can be explained by the Bitcoin, and then some, and then you get the space stuff for free. So now let's talk about the rest of their business, which is space, and they are in a hot sector. This company has been around for over 10 years. Originally, they did a lot of services for NASA. They do battery testing, abuse testing, all sorts of calorimetry, all sorts of testing for NASA. That's their slower growth business. That's the cash cow business for them. The bigger business for them is the space batteries business, and they recently got a very high level, one of the highest level certification of NASA for collision and impact, and essentially you can have like a very high impact item that goes into these batteries and they don't even trigger a single flame. And so that makes these batteries useful for space applications, to go on Mars, to go on the moon, also makes them for military, makes them eligible for a lot of military application. So that's the growing business, but also legacy. They've had those for a while, but that's the growth business. Now, we have new stuff at KULR in the past quarter. We've had new stuff. So one of them is drone batteries. So they expanded their KULR One Space to drone with now KULR One Air. And they do drone batteries. They presented that in August, I believe it was. They presented this. They do drone batteries, and they partnered with a company which, in my view, is very, very expensively valued compared to KULR Amprius. KULR and Amprius partner to launch KULR One, which is a drone batteries, very helpful in military applications and all sorts of drone. And so I think they're going to have a big business on this. And then they launched the Zero Vibe fan, which is a KULR Vibe. I'll get to that in a second. But it seems to me like they have a pretty interesting KULR Vibe division. Funny name, right? But what this does is it helps you rotate a fan at a speed that is desired and defined by AI. And with that, you can reduce vibration, and you can do important stuff with vibration, to the point that they fixed an issue on a marine helicopter, and this was the colonel from that base who thanks KULR for saving them $39 million despite having hundreds of man hours work trying to find a problem. They were about to discard an attack helicopter. They were about to discard it, and KULR came and they used their KULR Vibe technology, and they were able to fix the vibration issue that this helicopter had. So military applications, KULR Zero Vibe fan. This is an expansion of their fan, but that's for cooling servers. And they actually specifically mention AI by name and saying that you can have a KULR Vibe fan to cool servers. And I guess this is an alternative to liquid cooling, but they're talking about how it's a much more longevity because you eliminate vibration at the source, much higher speed, extended lifespan, enhanced cooling. So they're trying to extend their Vibe technology, which is very interesting as a side business. So and of course this was developed because of space. This vibration reduction system, all of this was developed because of space. You see their NASA services, they have rotary system vibration reduction services for NASA. So this was all developed because of space. So you can see you have a well-rounded space and aerospace company. And you also have a few wild card. This is the biggest wild card, of course, which is the Exoskeleton. They launched that last quarter, so we'll see what's going on with that. We'll see if they're doing well or not. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But anyways, this is obviously battery powered, so they're thinking they could do something with the batteries here. And they launched this also recently. This is a company that's doing a lot of stuff. Compared to just a Bitcoin Treasury company who's doing nothing, this company is actually doing a lot of stuff. There's an underlying business. So this is a BMS, right? A battery management system, next generation, again, for space application and very, very high demand application. And last but not least, not only KULR has acquired Bitcoin, but recently they've had a very interesting way of acquiring Bitcoin. I'm going to look at interesting. I don't think it's very interesting. I think it's interesting in the sense that very few people do that anymore. This used to be common in the early days of Bitcoin, where you would just rent Bitcoin mining capacity from a third party. So KULR has been able to find its own way to acquire Bitcoin by renting Bitcoin mining capacity from a third party. And so I don't know if they rent the hardware too, or if they use their own hardware. KULR doesn't give us much information. That'd be interesting to see. But I know that this is not their partnership, their mining partnership. This is not the first mining partnership that they do. They already have one in place. I'm guessing maybe the one they had in place has stopped, and they're going to ship the miners to this one, and this is their new partners. That's kind of what I'm guessing. And so in that case, they would own the terahash. The terahash is, petahashes, right? 900 petahash, 1 exahash by this fall they hope to have. So, mining operation, still 50 times smaller than a CleanSpark, for example, or Mara, but still nothing to sneeze at, because this is not a core business for them. But you can see they were able to get Bitcoin for 102,000 by mining it through these partnerships. So they are not only acquiring Bitcoin, but they are trying to acquire it at a discount with these mining partnerships. And very interestingly, in this partnership that we were talking about with Soluna, they were talking about how this partnership could be helpful for them to develop batteries, because Luna is a green off-grid type of application. So they briefly mentioned battery storage systems. I don't know if there's much meat behind that. probably not anytime soon. But more interestingly is, what kind of synergies could we see with KULR running Bitcoin miners and then also owning like new cooling system? So you have a company that could have cooling system, a company that could have battery solutions, potentially innovative battery solutions, and now a company that's getting into mining Bitcoin. I see some synergies possible, but of course that's not the key reason why I own the stock. I own the stock because of a margin of safety. I sleep well at night with KULR at $5. I think it's very, very cheap. I think this company could easily trade at $5 with no Bitcoin whatsoever. In fact, if it didn't have Bitcoin, given that they have a conflicted shareholder base, if they didn't have Bitcoin, they might actually trade higher. So we're getting that diversification discount. We're getting the discount that's due to the diversification and the lack of clarity that Saylor talks about sometimes. So anyways, interesting company, happy to own it. This was not investment advice. This is not financial advice, only entertainment on this channel. I hope you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.